Hey, muy buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. And as always, muchísimas gracias to everyone for you guys' words, prayers, your time, and your amazing support. I'm real humbled by everybody. Thank you. Now, to get into the story in hand, like I mentioned in the live, today I want to talk about a camarada that I sincerely had the great pleasure of getting to know in different scenarios as that disliking of certain situations that happen behind a Billy being careless with what came out his mouth, right? But do allow me to touch on it. The homie is Downer from Avenues. I met him in Corcoran. He came down to medical and then eventually went back up to the Bay. At the time, I thought due to my cancer treatments in Corcoran and just the follow-ups XX I was going to maintain there. I never foreseen the highly I was going to have to end up pulling there that would send me up to the Bay, right? Nevertheless, I got up there to the Bay, and the reason why we came across personally is because he was holding it down for his Billies from Avenue. You know, all camaradas have that perspective, right? They're from your neighborhood, so they're our Billies. At the time, well, I seen it, time and time again, and that's respectful, or I could respect that, right? It's the other angle I don't respect, as you guys by now probably know. But anyways, there he was doing his thing tough, mainly for Psycho, but overall for Peewee and just for his Billies. He had a lot of family down in Zacatecas that were doing their thing. To what extent, I couldn't even touch on it, right? Because again, that was the homies' things, and yeah, we networked in the sense of helped him touch base with certain material to his family, more so, right down there, and so I would eventually follow up. Again, when you're up in the Bay, you can either get there sit or you can maintain, by supporting or just put yourself in this position, right? To make feria, because that's all there is back there, especially when you're already back there for a suspicion of 187 and your walk alone single cell validated, right? There wasn't much you could do back there unless you could pull things. But anyways, I don't want to get off subject. Um, the homies had his reach through his family, right? But more so, he had a lot of respect and love for his neighborhood, which is understood. And again, he was supplying Psycho and Pee-wee, right? I mean, that Pee-wee. To what extent with Pee-wee at the moment I was in the States, so I was more into knowing what was happening there. So, this is when Psycho was more so trying to start working in Orange County and by Imperial, the areas that he's known to hold tough, right? But anyways, around 2009, it might have been 10, he would eventually punch out, right? He would or was gonna parole, but of course, he was born in Mexico, so the homie, he had to get deported, so he had to go through that whole process. And after I went to the feds, I will still stay back there for a couple more years. Nevertheless, within time, you guys know the story. I went to the feds and eventually got out. And the minute I hit the gate, I punched Mexico too, right? And where I'm at in my story, it kind of goes signs, right? Or it will continue off that. We're in Culiacan, and we uh we had gotten back, from Wasabi's after the last episode I talked to you about. So we had to basically duck, right, hide, or just stay in the shadows. But again, they were gonna start, looking for angles. So basically, they sent us out there to Zacatecas. It was a little town, maybe an hour from the capital, right? It was called San Jose de la Era or something like that. But it was San Jose something. But I remember we got there to Zacatecas, and then from there it was like an hour's drive somewhere there. But anyways, I'll be sincere with you, the homie received us, and again we were networking in Cali, so it wasn't like a stranger type of thing, right? I respected the homie, and the way he conducted himself, I could say it was mutual, not just with me, but with the Bealies that went with me, right? And now they're camaradas. But after being, for over 23 years behind a cell, getting blessed, getting the technicality of my life, the homie showed me a lot, right? That I had not seen, and it was the first time I sat down and really took care in and seen what was out, or I had time to sit and take in, right? Basically, he had I'm not gonna say it was an hacienda, but he had a house and a couple acres around that little house. It wasn't like something like way out there, but the homie, he was living it, right? To me, that's a dream type of thing, right? What the homie had, he was down here and Billy's respected him because down in Mexico, he was more tough with peewee. That's the difference between the state and the feds, right? The feds have more reach out this way or other states. For example, again, I had the pleasure of talking to him, so we had that more of a trusting type of thing when it came to material, right? Or related to it. Again, Billy's respected that he didn't want to do nothing with the movement that was going on in Mexico, right? Because he was already set in what he was doing for Pee Wee, and nobody could request anything else because that would be stepping on toes, right? And it was reaching Psycho, and I don't know if his neighborhood, but I know for a fact it was concentrated on Pee Wee at this time, right? And everything was filmic, and this rancho was his. He was from Zacatecas, but of course, you don't stay in the city here. You want to stay in the shadows, off road. So he bought from his family, took to the rancho, and then from there he had the pipeline set to reach well, I won't put marcas, but it was one of them states, that's out there. And basically, if what's worth out here in Mexico, you put it in Cali, and it's already double, almost triple. Or from the LA out to this state, it was, you tripled it again. It was one of them type of avenues, right? And everything was going good, but the things of losing things, it happens. That's why you gotta always have that vaquita there to when there's a loss, you could cover it. You know, that's one thing a lot of individuals don't ever take into consideration, right? They want to just get greedy and make feria after feria, and you never secure that loss that's gonna come. There's no buts about it. But anyways, the homie had it covered. That wasn't an issue. You see, the issue came that there was a pause on the touchdown of the queso, right? The feria. And Billies have this tendency to get on phones and just be blunt about things, because there's nothing that they can really ricochet towards them. They're lifers. They're already, most of them are in a high security prison where you're mostly slammed down. So the time they get around to touching base, they want to see results. They don't want excuses, which is like that in everything, right, in life. And basically, P was upset, asking the whys. He put the homie Downer's name and location. And by this time, you guys can imagine, just think about it. 2009 is when he took off from Pelican Bay. To the time I met him in the ranch, it must have been 2020. So just, I don't want to really touch on what he was doing exactly, but just, you guys put it one and one together on the time frame and the knowledge that the feds must have had, right? But of course, if you do things right, you stay in the shadows. But another thing is, you gotta start utilizing gente and move around. You can't stand still or comfortable, because it just comes with the territory too. Nevertheless, peewee, again, he put amounts, prices, location, avenues, and the homie's name all behind it, right? And to tell him he best gets to resolving it. And it resolved itself, but nevertheless, marshals are tough. I know a lot of people don't think that they will come and get you, but believe me, they'll come into Mexico and they'll snatch you up, especially if it has something to do with you supplying members, or if they attach you to a family that's well known to Mukale, right? Which, if I mention the homie's family's name and his last name, you guys will know exactly who I'm talking about, from Zacatecas. But again, I don't know where he's at. I don't know what ended up happening. You see, we followed up with him. They came to the spot. The town and everything got linked, and it ain't like you could go to Mexico or come to Mexico to a town, even as Culiacan is. And for example, you come to Culiacan and say, el cholo que vive en el rancho, todo tatuado con cuernos, with horns, to point you exactly where I'm at. You know, it ain't a secret. And it's a big city here. Smash in a small town. A homie tatted up. You know, he had a half in his neck blasted across. So it ain't like you could hide it. And with this, I'm not saying the homie was ashamed of it. You know, he was doing everything correct. But again, slip up over that phone. You know, and by this time, you know, the Billys are out in state, and you guys can imagine, you know, a call from a federal prison into a state, even though it's behind a phone, talking about from Mexico to LA to different states, is how marshals are going to be on it, you know, especially if they had an open investigation wondering. So they came and snatched up the homie. You know, if he was gonna go to the feds, so after that call cycle, he basically said, "Oh, well, you know." After all, he was working more directly with Peewee and his reach to that state. You know, the homie basically supplied Peewee out of respect, right? And he was already out here. That's when Camarada shows heart, right? And I'm not minimizing nobody that comes out and does their thing. It's just I'm talking about showing love to a Billy in his neighborhood because his family's well set. Come down here and set and just, you know, tap into whatever he can with the support of the family and just be cool. Instead, he chose that and he got the bad end of the stick by getting picked up by the marshals, taken back. And, you know, as he's in holding, of course, you know, they start throwing them indictments out. And, you know, of course, it's what you have to do, right? Deny knowledge on everything. So, you know, both angles play the same thing as the people they picked up out there in that state that was attached to this. And, you know, due to this mistake or greedy move, you know, that Pee-wee did, had everything taken down so the Ferian could not be taken care of. Cause, you know, they busted out here in Mexico and they busted out there on the food that was collecting. So the food that was supposed to pay, what are they gonna do? Well, he's gone, I'm gonna sit on it. Which is, it's a loss when you're moving things, right? Someone gets busted or stuff, the dead's dead. It's a common knowledge, but you can't do that with the greedy that has the gato tendencies, right? So, how did he repay the homie? Send him on a bogus mission that put him in a cross with a different Billy, and that different Billy put him on the list. I don't know what came after or where the homie went. All I know, he must have been butthurt when Pee-wee did not stick his hands in the fire for him. They didn't even give him the respects of fixing the feria, right? Issue and waiting for the feria. It's how a greedy person that's in need of power and needs to feed his ego thinks, right? I'll back out and let him hit the fence solo instead of showing love back. But you see, is what happens time and time again. You could sacrifice your life. your family, your freedom, everything. And at the end of the day, it's not gonna be showed back when things hit the fans. See, they take that literally. Si caes solo. They take that when it was another Billy, especially if there's feria that they're losing out on. It's easier to take your career than to give you the chance to come up with the feria, because the homie could have came up with it, his familia would have for sure. But of course, it was a Billy's fault, but it was easier to blame Downer for the delay of the money and him having to talk on the phone. At the end of the day, they're never wrong. La camarada will always pay. So just keep in mind before you sacrifice and get misled into something that throughout whatever prison you're in, the work you put in, whatever you bring, you can never satisfy that ego, that gato mentality. Or do tell me, have you ever met a drug addict that's maintaining itself stable? Never gotten out of pocket and character, and always abused those closest to them? Well, just pay your mind around that. Don't sacrifice those friendships, that love for your neighborhood. You sitting down and suffering, your family. Always be smarter than the next man. Respectful, but smarter. And never go sideways. There's no need for it if you never set yourself up for it, right? Stay true to yourself and loyal to your loved ones.